Okay, good morning. How's everybody doing today? Great, great. Well, Daniel, thanks again. I appreciate the introduction, and thanks for our Bad Economic Development Association for bringing us all together, providing us the coffee, and providing us the opportunity to get to know one another. And thanks to all of you for taking time out of your morning to come on in and spend time with us to uncover a few things that we're going to be discussing today. So let me begin by telling you a little bit about myself and how I arrived here today. Daniel gave you guys a brief overview. But to share a little bit more, I took Wadsworth South and I made a right on Ralston. I'm only joking. I worked hard on that joke. All kidding aside, I'm Leon Cerna, and I've been working in human resources for some time. I provide HR outsourcing and consulting services to organizations in both the private and the public sector. The goal, my objective, is to make life as easy as possible for organizations, to take care of their most important asset, the employees, to provide them the opportunity to focus on their customers. So with that, there's a lot of different tangible pieces that are involved. And for me, one of the most critical things is what we're going to cover today. There are three key things I'm going to show you today. One, how to develop your aspiration. Two, how to take your aspiration and use that to hire the very best for your organizations. And third, I'm going to share with you how to say goodbye with some employees when it's kind of hard to do. I'm looking forward to spending some time with you. And through that process of understanding what it's like to say goodbye to somebody, you got to understand what employee engagement is like. Today out there in the workforce, it's pretty much at an all-time low. Just recently, I read in the Gallup survey, about 2/3 of employees are disengaged at work. So disengagement means that they're not even there, right? In this study, they said that 2/3 of the employees are actively disengaged from work. Actively disengaged. So they went from being disengaged to actively disengaged. What does that mean? That means that they're not even trying. They're not even showing up to work. They're not even showing up to even try. I'm sure if you think back to your workplace, there's a few of those people that you have that you're like, are they even here today? Those are the people who are showing up, getting a paycheck, coming in and walking out the door. They come in and day out. Meanwhile, most of the rest of you in the organization, the people who get up and be here at 7:30 in the morning, are the go-getters who are active in their mind and want to be providing really great service to their customers and their clients. So when you think about it, and you go back and you say 2/3, you're going to look around, it's going to be pretty easy to find those people who are not able to deliver on the promises and commitments that your organization has made. So today we're going to cover a few things, as I mentioned. Does this picture look familiar to anybody? Yeah. There's a lot of sleepless nights that a lot of people have. There's a lot of worry and consternation that we all go through. I used to be a worrier, and would stay up nights thinking about everything possible, things that I did not have control over. So you all have a piece of paper in front of you. If you take a moment, if you could, please write down what kept you up or what keeps you up at night. I'll just give you a few minutes. Doesn't need to be too long. Don't make it a 5-sentence paragraph or anything. You're not going to have to share it with anybody. So if what keeps you up at night is the person next to you, it's okay. All right, just a few more seconds. Okay, now if you could, please hold it up high. Whether you can see it or I can see it, I don't really care. Just hold it up high. Now I want you to take that time and effort you put in writing this stuff down to crumple it up, because it's time to say goodbye and good night, buenas noches to all this good writing you do, and if you can make it, I'll give you a Starbucks gift card to the first person who made it. Wow, that's pretty impressive. There you go. That's pretty good. If you make it, I'm going to have to run to the store and get you something more. Good job. Thanks a lot. Really, the idea is that there's a lot that we stay up at night about. And when I came across this quote recently, very wasteful, all this paper. Just got thrown around. When I was thinking about staying up at night, as I mentioned, I used to stay up quite a bit. I came across this quote, and it's from Mark Twain, and he talks about, like, is it worth it, essentially? Because soon after you've spent all that time and worry and consternation over it, you realize it's not. So saying goodnight to it and saying goodbye and putting those worries to sleep is the most important thing you can do to enable you to be able to move forward. Now, about 15 years ago, I learned how to mountain bike. Kind of coincides with the time I moved out here to Colorado. So learning how to mountain bike is really all not that different from riding a bicycle, right? It's in your street. But it is a little different than riding a beach cruiser in California. You don't need to wear a helmet. When you're mountain bike, you need to wear a helmet. So lesson one I learned, wear a helmet. Lesson number two that I learned was keep your head up. So it's very easy, especially when you're making a big climb, to drop your head and start looking like about 3 or 4 feet in front of you. And you start looking down, it gets tiring, it gets exhausting, and it works you over and over and over. And you start noticing all these little things in the road. When you're mountain biking, if you keep your head down, you'll see that rock. In life, sometimes you see other things. But in mountain bike riding, what you see is what you hit. So in mountain bike riding, when your head is down and you see that rock in the road, you try to avoid it and you catch it, it can take you down depending on how big that rock might be or how fast you might be going. When you drive a car and you're going through a parking lot or you're driving down the street and you see a pothole, you begin to veer towards it and you hit the pothole. There's a lot of examples I can give you. In golf, for anybody who might play golf, if you stand at the tee box, you look at that beautiful green, you say, all right, the ball has to go there. Within seconds, you stand back and you start seeing the water and you start worrying about putting that ball in water. In business, sometimes if you start thinking about making that wrong hire, inevitably, you make a bad hire. So what you focused on is where your actions and results tend to go. As I mentioned, in mountain bike riding, it means that you're going to be hitting a tree. Not a good place to be, as you can see. What I ask of you to do today in life when you go back to your office is to really take a step back and evaluate, expand your horizons. Give yourself the opportunity to widen your gaze and see the destination just a little more clearly. See where you want to go, see what's in front of you, and enjoy the ride. Two things are going to happen. One, you're going to reach your destination a lot faster, a lot safer if you're mountain bike riding, but you're also going to get the opportunity to enjoy the ride and learn a lot about the nuances of that trip, in this case, down the hill towards your final destination. So I encourage you to take the time to be able to do that in business and in life. Because as you drive down the road, as this picture illustrates, you'll be able to achieve your goals and your destinations, and you'll have a positive outcome. So we're going to spend time today reviewing how to incorporate that into life for you. An example for me, how I incorporated into life as a young person was my fiance and I. So I met my fiance, and we started talking about, had a typical fight that most couples do. And we were arguing and fussing and fighting over something that was, at the time, very, very important for us to talk about. We had a sleepless night, tossing and turning. Then we received some advice. And the advice my fiance and I received was, don't get married. No, that's not what we received. What we were told was, it's important to let it go. And this is before Frozen. And I have a 3.5-year-old right now, and I hear a lot of Frozen. But this was before Frozen. But the point was to let it go, throw it in the proverbial wastebasket, and be able to move on. When you're riding that mountain bike or you're driving that car, you see potholes. In marriage, in that case, the proverbial pothole for us was focusing on this argument that really did not impact our destination of where we wanted to go as a couple. So, worry, sleepless nights, they're all things that are not going to be that helpful for you. So I encourage you to let it go and be able to move on. Whether you are the boss of the organization, whether you are the leader and you have a company of size of one, or you are one of many in a team, it's important that you understand what your role is and that you stay close to that objective of what you're trying to accomplish day in and day out. A little bit about my lens. So I shared just a little bit of my professional background. My parents, who I adore, I learned a lot from over the years. I'm the youngest of 5, and through that time period, I had the opportunity to spend time with my parents as they were getting older. Knock on wood, my parents are still alive. In fact, my dad's about to celebrate his 80th birthday next Monday. The thing I learned from my parents was they were an entrepreneur. Not always, but they became one. For most of my life, they were entrepreneurs. From about the age of 3, I followed my parents around everywhere. They owned a restaurant and catering service, and I was everywhere that I could possibly be to annoy them and everyone else who came to my parents' restaurant. I learned a lot during that process about business. I learned a lot about how to treat others. Some key lessons I learned was one thing that was for certain for my dad was death and taxes. I can't tell you how many times I heard that. 2, I also learned that it's important that you take care of your people and try to find the very best. But realize that the other important lesson, it's very hard to find people who care as much as you. 3rd, what I learned from my dad was that you're going to get the opportunity to make money. And people are going to want your money even before you've actually made it. So be patient with yourself in that process. The other key lesson I really learned from my parents, which is probably the most comical for me, is do yourself a favor and don't go into business for yourself. I was scared all ends of belief just because it felt like to me like that was the worst thing in the world to possibly do. The lessons I learned from my parents were great. They were always involved, and for them, at least for my mom, I don't think she had an alarm clock. She would bounce out of bed almost every morning. My father, maybe not so much. But their mind was always working. My dad had a notepad next to his bedside where he would write notes, and as soon as he woke up, he would write something down. Or if he woke up in the middle of the night, he would write down an idea. So for their business, they were always thinking about the different things that they could do. My dad, it was like remodeling, it was a change of service, it was opening a catering service. They had a food truck before food trucks were popular, because this was in the early 80s. On and on and on. Tons of ideas. My mom, she was the executor. She pretty much got everything done. That's not executor in the bad way, it's executor in the good way. She was the person who was getting all the work done in the house, both at home and at the restaurant. The mornings were early, but they jumped out of bed and they were always excited. And for them, what their heart was, where their heart was, and their motivation, it was to provide quality food to their customers. They came from New Mexico and Colorado. In fact, my parents met here in Colorado in the 50s and migrated out to California later on. And for them, they were just ecstatic about bringing the food of Colorado and New Mexico to California. So it's high quality, creative food where they had droves of people who were coming to visit them. It was great. It was a great experience as a kid to be a part of, and I learned a lot from them during that time. Today, both business leaders and owners all face a very similar thing. They're always inspiring. They always want to jump out of bed. But it's hard. It's hard to find those people, and it's hard to identify what your heart is and what you're excited about and why you're in business. Aspiring is what's really critical and how to define your aspiration for your organization is what's key. So for some, it takes on different motives. Some people just know what they want to do, and it starts with the heart almost immediately. For my parents, my dad knew he had other circumstances that kind of developed that caused him to kind of find something different and move out to California and bring the whole family. And they were motivated. They were motivated for a few different reasons. As I mentioned, I'm the youngest of 5. The spread in the family was about 15 years from the oldest to the youngest. So they were clearly motivated to make sure we had a roof over our heads and that we were getting everything that we needed day in and day out. And they had a lot of ups and downs. The challenge that my dad faced, as I mentioned a little earlier, is to find those people who could match his motivation, his aspiration. And the same goes for my mom. So we started this morning talking about what keeps you up at night. Now, if you could, take a card. I would like for you to write down on this index card what gets you up in the morning. Now, I'll give you some context before we start writing. But for me, it could be a dog. It could be a 3.5-year-old who this morning was surprised that the sun was not up when we were driving to her daycare. But everyone's a little bit different. But I really want you to keep it in the context of business, in your work life, to help understand what gets you up, what inspires you to get going in your day. I'll give you all a few minutes. And for those who feel comfortable, I invite you to share. I'll give you a moment to do that. This you're going to keep, so I don't want you to think you're going to be tossing this away. All right, anyone feel comfortable enough to share? What keeps you up? Go ahead. What gets you up? Go ahead.
Bakery, so what gets me up is what specialization the bakery will be a part of this week.
Nice.
We have a 1-year-old birthday cake that's being picked up today. So.
Yeah, that's exciting. Great, thank you for sharing. Go ahead.
I run 2 businesses, and both of them will serve people. So I'm always excited to see which people I'm going to serve, maybe some new people I might meet. And then I work with my wife, so it's always fun to get up and share the day and plan it out.
Great. It is motivating. Someone raise your hand in the back. Go ahead. Going skiing? That's good. Yeah, it's beautiful outside. A little windy, but still nice. Anyone else want to share? Go ahead.
Sometimes I fall asleep thinking about problems, and I wake up with solutions, and I want to write them down before I forget them.
Yeah, like I mentioned, it's very similar to what my father used to do. He often would say that your brain will work overnight if you give it the chance to think about some things The important thing is sleeping. If you can go to sleep having done that, that's important. I tried that same philosophy in college of like studying just a little bit and then going to bed. And then my brain would magically learn everything. Sometimes that worked, sometimes it really didn't work, just depending on how much I knew information. What other examples? Anyone want to share? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm a business consultant, so I always wake up trying to figure out ways to help the business. I mean, there's many ways that we do that, but I'm always thinking about my day and prioritizing what I have to get done and actually running some conversations in my head.
Great. Yeah, it's exciting.
Let's do that, running conversations in your head.
Well, no. I mean, well, if you're alone, it's okay. You can actually do it out loud. If you're like me this morning in the car talking to myself, it looks kind of awkward to other people. Thank God for Bluetooth, because now people don't know if you're really talking to yourself or talking to someone else. So you can get really hands big and no one really knows much what's going on. Yeah, it's no, those are all great examples of what gets you up in the morning. I don't want to stop. If anyone else has another one to share, please raise your hand and I'll call on you. It's very motivating. For me, as I mentioned, what I learned from my parents, it started with just spending time with them since I was 3, running around and causing havoc. But I really learned about, kind of similar to what you guys had mentioned, about serving other people and how exciting and motivating that is, whether you are owning your own business or you are working for a large organization. It's the opportunity that you get to serve others in some capacity and make their day just a little more exciting. You know, later today I'm spending time with an organization on hiring, and we're going through and reviewing different resumes and some interviewing tips and so on and so forth. And for me, I'm so excited about it. I'm excited that they're gonna look to hire somebody who's gonna make a big difference for their organization. And for me, I get giddy about it. I was giddy about coming here this morning, so I get up really excited and motivated. Once I learned how to go to sleep, it helped. Having a baby really gave you a whole different appreciation of sleep, though, because you really don't get much of it for a long period of time for those who have kids. So, as anyone, or you may or may not have heard of Simon Sinek, so I'll just share a little bit about who Simon Sinek is. He's an author, an optimist, who wrote a book called It Starts With Why. And this book is kind of, I think in his own words, he talks about it as though this idea has been out there, this thought has been certainly provided by others, but he really was able to put it into context and write it obviously into a great book. You can find him on TED Talks everywhere. He does a great job. He's a good speaker, and he covers the topic better than I can today. So I'm not going to go that in depth on his topic, but what I'm going to share with you, though, is some key fundamentals which I think are appropriate for us today, and they tie into our discussion. So his concept that he really puts forward is something called the golden circle. The golden circle covers 3 different areas: why, how, and what. Now, for most of us, the why and the how and the what, you may have an idea of what those things are, and I'll break them down for you a little bit later. What he says is that it's important to start with the why before you go anywhere else. There's a lot of leaders out there in the world who inspire other people, and he'll tell you that they usually start with the why. And the why, the reason why it's so important is because it taps into, in my opinion, in the heart. It gets you motivated. It inspires you. And if you think about some politicians and leaders throughout the world that we've been exposed to, depending on your age or what you've read in history, John F. Kennedy always started with the why, in my opinion. MLK was another person. And in today's times, a person who's not a politician but is a business owner and leader, who recently passed away, is Steve Jobs. Very enthusiastic about starting with the why, and his company still has it today. In fact, I think a lot of entrepreneurs do a great job of starting with their why. They know why they're in business, and for them, that's where they're motivated. It goes back to my parents. My dad and mom, they knew why they were in business. They're excited about cooking. They're excited to just share this with other people. It wasn't really about the money for them. It was just about sharing some talents. So entrepreneurs do a great job with it. The challenge I think some of us face is that you get excited about it and you don't do a great job of communicating it to other people. And so we're going to develop your aspiration a little bit more today using Simon's model, and then we're going to use it to, as I mentioned, how to hire and ultimately how to say goodbye. So breaking down this model just a little bit for you, if you're able to articulate this correctly, you're going to get a lot of success because people are going to be motivated to join you. So the what? Pretty simple. The what is really your service and your goods and products that you provide. So a bakery, it's baked goods, right? Which I'm a big fan of. So that's exciting, right? And that's pretty simple. That's what you do every single day, and that's what gets put out in front of people. Next is the how. Again, not really rocket science. This is what really sets you apart from another person. The best example I can provide to you on this, so this is like your value proposition, if you will, what differentiates you from your competition. What's simple to understand about this is when you walk into your favorite restaurant, bless you, when you walk into your favorite restaurant and you see it's kind of busy or maybe there's an open section and you start to look for that favorite server because you've been in this restaurant numerous times and you know you get great, excellent service from that server and you might request to work in that section. That person who's serving you, they've been able to differentiate themselves because you've searched them out. You sought them out to provide you their great service again. So the how is a critical component, and in business and in what you do as for your organization is also critical. The next part, the why. So the why is what's more of the inspirational, of what gets you, again, kind of along the lines of what gets you up in the morning. Why does your organization exist? Why does your business exist? Why are you involved in making cakes in the morning? Or why do you get up and look forward to serving your customers? Why are you serving it? What is so exciting about it? And why should that matter to anyone else who might be coming to access your what that you are providing? The why is about your contribution to impact and to serve others. He carefully notes that it's really not about money. So some people come out and say, oh, I'm in it to make money. And I think that was a pretty fashionable statement to make probably about 10 years ago. But we've kind of moved a little bit beyond that, and now people are more motivated into understanding what attracts to their heart. Sorry about that, Mike. So the challenge for most people is that most organizations start from the outside and work their way in. So they begin by looking at the why and say, okay, that's nice, but when I'm describing my company or my organization, I'm going to tell you what I do before I even get to the why. So they begin by telling you the goods and services they provide. It's easiest for us to explain it, so that's what we do. But it doesn't really inspire anybody. Cynic says, start from the inside and work your way out. So begin to communicate with other people why you're in business first, and then the how and the what. Now, there's a lot of companies out there today who do a good job in it. And I'll tell you that if you are able to do this correctly, you'll inspire people. Not only inspire people to come and buy your baked goods, but you also inspire people to come and want to work with you and work for you. So you have people who are interested. From an organizational standpoint, you'll find people come out of the woodworks because they want to be a part of your team. So like an individual standpoint, if you have an organization that's about 500 employees, or if you worked for a company that was of that size, you knew the kind of the managers that you wanted to be a part of. And this is very similar. It's because those people understood the why. Go ahead.
Do you know how
SINEK. And I'll show you the resources at the end of the presentation as well. So there's some great companies that are out there that do a nice job of this. One is Airbnb. Anyone here heard of Airbnb? Raise your hand. So Airbnb is a great company. Their mantra, if you will, the thing that gets people so motivated is you belong anywhere. Sounds exciting. I belong. I feel like I'm going to be a part of something. I don't even know what I'm a part of. But recently, I'm planning a trip. Guess what I did? I went on Airbnb. I've never used it. Now, I have used VRBO. I've used Travelocity. I've used a lot of, there's tons of hotel sites you can go to. There's a lot of, the VRBO types. Well, Airbnb is much the same, but it's such a buzz, there's so much excitement about it that I had to look it up. And then I learned what their mantra was. I'm like, oh, I can be anywhere, I belong. It inspired me to try to book with them. Another company that does a nice job of this that I've used recently is Uber. Uber's mantra, if you will, or their mission is, I want to make sure I get this right, it is evolving the way the world moves. It sounds pretty, aren't they just a taxi cab company, really? You call them, they show up. I can call Daniel, he'll come pick me up. So, but you also put a little Uber sticker and I got to find them on an app. It's really exciting and I feel different about it. So it's unique when people can start with their why on what they're able to accomplish. And the people that they get not only to use the service, like me on your phone, but you also get people who want to drive. Like for years, I remember I was in LA, downtown LA once, and I had to get a cab, and the guy shows up to get in the cab, and he's got this big old book, and he's got this pad, and he's writing all kinds of stuff, all these journals. I'm like, what are you doing? And he's like, oh man, I'm just a cab driver. I don't want to be. I'm a writer. And so he wanted to write. Now you have people who don't they want to be a driver. They don't want to be a writer so much. And he was talking about how much he wanted to be a writer. So it's unique just the drive and the motivation that people have to be a part of this. For some reason, I really don't know, but it's probably because the company started with their why. Politicians do an excellent job of talking about the why. Without even getting into your political beliefs, I'll show you two examples that are on both sides. One person's currently in office, Obama. He started with hope. That was his campaign of, I think, 8 years ago-ish time frame. Hope, very exciting. It really tapped into your emotions about what he was doing and what he wanted to accomplish. And people felt inspired. People were joining the campaign to help because they wanted to be a part of hope. And today, through the race, there's a politician who's in the news seemingly every day, of course, is Donald Trump. But his mantra, make America great. I think he adds again at the end. But again, whether you believe in him or not, it's interesting. Like, oh yeah, who doesn't want to make America great again? It's almost un-American to not make America great again. Now, his definition, your definition may differ, but the point is that it's aspiring. And so politicians do an excellent job, and really as an organization, we're not that much different. Whether you are managing a team of 10 or a team of 500, or you're a small business and you have 4 or 5 people working for you, you need to make sure that you're able to articulate your why, not only to yourself first, to your partners, but also to your employees. So that is taking the aspiration and using it to hire. My first experience with the why. This little graphic, this picture, you guys are probably familiar with it. It comes from Apple. Back in the day, it was Apple versus PC. So for me, I was more like the guy on the left, which is a bit ironic because this is about 15 years ago, maybe a little bit longer, about 20 years ago. And I worked for an insurance company. And I was in human resources, and part of what I was tasked with was recruiting and hiring staff into our organization. I had a few other things I had to do, but that was one of the big things. And I ran an internship program. So I was on a college campus, out there hustling, trying to get kids to be interested in me. Now, because I worked for this insurance company, guess how I was dressed? A lot like the guy on the left, or kind of a lot like I'm dressed today, except not as fashionable. I was wearing a black suit, a white shirt, because that's all my company you were allowed to wear were white shirts, and a dark colored tie. I'm in Southern California, stand on the campus, at this point, Long Beach State, or as some refer to it, Cal State University, Long Beach. And I was standing there sun beating down, and I look across the way, and of course nobody is stopping by to say hi. It's getting pretty lonely. I mean, it was like my worst dream, nightmare I've ever had, because I had all the good stuff. I was lined up, a nice big brochure stand. Nobody's coming by. And I look across, and I see all these fancy .com kids. I say kids. They're probably the same age, maybe a little bit younger, but they had all the cool stuff, man. They had like these gizmos. They had, actually they had one of these. I remember this because they had a laser pointer, and they're like, yeah, this is awesome. Come look what your cat can do. I'm like, why would anybody be interested? They're throwing frisbees. They had baseballs. They had footballs. And they're all wearing like khakis and, shirts and T-shirts, and they were just like super cool and casual. They're telling people, come here. We'll give you a signing bonus to be an intern. I mean, it was incredible. And you can wonder why I really didn't have any interest in what I was doing, because what I had behind me was, come be a claims adjuster. Come be an underwriter. Isn't this fun? Anybody here work in insurance? Okay, so you know what it's like, because I started out doing that stuff too. So it's not necessarily the most exciting thing to want to do, but what I learned was we had a why. I was so frustrated that day because I felt like I didn't like not being a cool kid and seeing all these other people have. I mean, there were like lines of people, and I was like trying to give away basically internships. So I went back to the office and I started brainstorming and spent a lot of time with my boss and some other coworkers and writing stuff down. And it was a large insurance company. At the time, we had maybe about 15,000 employees. And we had a lot of corporate slogans and campaigns and a lot of other good stuff, but we kind of felt a little empty. But I had to figure out, why are we different and what do we do? So I started talking to a lot of them. And part of our training program, you spent a lot of time learning the whole business. So I had learned basics of underwriting, of claims adjusting, of work comp, of commercial underwriting, of how to understand what a boiler does, all kinds of crazy stuff. But it was exciting. I became a licensed agent. And what I learned during that process of talking to all these different people was what our why was about was helping others in their time of need. So organizations are really not that much different. But for me, I thought, I think I have something. I can take this and I can explain this a little bit differently to those college interns, those people who I'm trying to get involved and buy into what I'm doing. So I went back with some stories. And I started communicating these stories every single opportunity I have, and I became involved with a lot of these different schools and universities in a different way. So I told them, not come be a claims adjuster and be an underwriter. It was come work for us, be an intern, and learn how you can make a difference in the lives of people. And people became interested in that. And they wondered, how do I do that? And really, it was about the stories I was sharing is, you get a phone call from an elderly couple who's just been involved in an earthquake, and they need help. Their house is a mess. There's a tree that's probably fell onto their house. Sometimes come with bad weather. It's raining. They can't protect their goods, and we need to send a team out there to help them out. Car gets stolen. I need help. I need to, one, replace my car because I get to work. So as a claims adjuster, you're there in their time of need. As an underwriter, you're helping them find a policy that's going to work out well for them to give them the very best coverage that they can possibly get. So I started telling this over and over and over and over and over and over to people and articulating why it was so important to be part of our organization. And slowly, people started getting interested. Now, it took a lot of work because, again, I still didn't have the cool devices to be able to share with everybody, but it was a little bit easier to sell because I knew the positions that I had just weren't that sexy to sell right at the gate. That's a proprietary HR term. But what I learned was that it was the opportunity to make a difference in the lives of people. So for the Golden Circle, what I developed for myself at the time, and I didn't know it, was really about the clarity of why. I knew what we did, I knew how we did it, but I really didn't understand why we did it. And ultimately, it became something that I was able to spin, and in later years, our organization came up with a slogan. At one point, it was about doing the right thing. So no matter what, you wanted to make sure you're going to do the right thing. And if you find a lot of companies, like Nordstrom, kind of follows a very similar path, which is, there's stories about people who return things that don't even belong there. And for a while there, I worked for one company. They used to tell a story that someone shows up with 4 tires to make a return at a store that is not a place that even sells tires, but they take the return anyways because they're about doing the right thing at the right time for those people. And really, in insurance, it was much similar. And for your business, it's understanding what that why is so you can articulate it. Once you're able to articulate it to other people, not only to your customers and your clients, but also to people who you're running into, you'll begin a little bit of fire that will grow and grow and grow to become something really great. Once you determine your why, you can use that to hire. You can use that to cultivate your team and your people so everyone is going in the same direction as you. It's so exciting to see, and it's motivating to see. And I've been spending the time for myself and helping other organizations and making sure I understand their why so they can hire with it. If you can't hire correctly with it, you end up making some really bad hires. Simon, ultimately, this is what he says. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And it's really the same thing when it comes to where people decide to work. They don't come to work for you because, not necessarily, just because of X, whatever that X might be. They come to work for you because there's a connection, and they kind of like what you're doing, or they have some interest in what you're doing or why you're doing it. If you're able to sell it right, it'll make a big difference. During this process, what I learned, because it took so much time to really get in front of people to articulate why they should come work for us, that we developed a concept, and it kind of fed off a larger concept in the organization of always be selling your organization. So some people, I don't know if you guys can read that up there, but it's a sign that says now hiring, and underneath it says must have a clue. That is not obviously the greatest way to go about hiring, but when I came across this slide, I had to include it. It's pretty funny. It's not the best way. And typically, back in the day, you'd see a sign outside that says, come on in, we're hiring, or open job. And I'm going to date myself a little bit, but I have older siblings, so I'll blame them. We used to watch a show called Alice. Anybody remember that show? So it was, of course, by the time I was watching, it was on reruns. But we were watching a show called Alice, and like in the opening little, I don't even remember the song, but the opening little thing they do, she walks in and she grabs that sign from the side, and she walks in, she's like, I'll take your job. You know, she was excited. We don't really do that much anymore, but the idea is pretty simple, that you want to have an open door because you never know where your next customer or your next hire is going to come from. So the concept that we really developed back then was always be selling your organization constantly, because you never know where the next person is going to walk in the door. You could find that person getting your cup of coffee in the morning at a Starbucks. You can find that person picking you up on an Uber. You can find that person on the train station heading down towards, now you can go all the way to the airport. You never know where they're going to be. And if you keep yourself open to that, and you're able to always articulate your why someone should work for your organization, because inevitably people will ask. They'll ask, what do you do? And typically you'll start with, what I do is I'm a baker. Okay, but why do you do it? And for you, your why was pretty similar, because you said right at the gate, it's the celebrations and the moments I have in people's lives of providing them a piece of what I've produced so they can enjoy it. And you're a part of that celebration, even though you're not there. That's inspiring. But you never know where that next great hire may be. Also, you never know when you're going to run into somebody and you're going to second guess that company that you might be going to. Recently, I was driving and was cut off. And I'm from California, so for me to get cut off, it's pretty bad. But I got cut off, and I stopped. I'm like, well, clearly that person's in a hurry. You know, they got to go. I get out, and I go up because I'm going to get something from this place. I'm leaving the name of the company out. But I get out, and I'm going in to get something, and I see this person running and putting on their apron to go inside of this place I'm about to go into. And it's the same person who just cut me off. because, you make eye contact. You're like, so I knew who they were. And I see them run in. I went, oh, I don't think I want to go there. Like, I don't need to see that again because she's all a mess. She's a wreck that day. She's not having a good day. Now, it could have been just one bad day in her life. She was in a hurry. She was running late, whatever the case may be. Everyone's been there. We've all gone through it. But for me, in that moment, I was going to take my business elsewhere. So you were always selling your organization, whether you're in a session like you are today or you're out there at a job fair trying to get people to come work for your organization. Always be talking about your why will give you the opportunity to find a lot of people. The process to hire is very similar to that of buying a car. Now, I'm not necessarily a big fan of Forester and Outback, and I'm not getting paid for them to advertise this, but the example is these are pretty two similar cars. In fact, I really didn't know what these two cars were until I moved to Colorado. They're extremely popular out here. And I don't understand, to be honest, I don't know the difference between the two all that much. They look a little bit different, sure. But the process of buying a car is daunting for some people. And for some people like myself who studied economics in college, I'm very meticulous in what I look for. So I examine the specs inside and out. I look at the color, and I want two-wheel drive, four-wheel drive, all-wheel drive. I examine the engines. I examine consumer reports. I read everything possibly I'm digesting. Everything, from soup to nuts, trying to make sure that I'm going to buy the right car. When you're hiring, it's a very similar process. Now, the time and effort you take in buying a car, for some people, it's pretty fast. There's some people who show up the day before, they kind of know what I want. I've kind of been looking around. I'm good, and I go. But really, if you step back and you think, even before you stepped into that dealership, you spent a lot of time doing some self-reflection on what you wanted. You saw that car on the road. You're like, I like it. I think I want that one. I kind of like this color. I need this because my old car doesn't have that. I want to be able to play my MP3 device. So it's got to have that. It's got to have a good sound system. Whatever the process may be. And then you walk in, and then you got to deal with the negotiation, the haggling, signing paperwork. It can still take a long time, even if you know what you want to do. But it's very similar to that of hiring. But time is money. So you spend, let's say for some people, a few months perhaps in buying a car because you've thought about it a lot. It's about, for some people, usually a minimum about a $35,000 investment. Now, according to Kelley Blue Book, you actually have a car, most people in the United States have a car for just over 4 years. And you spend a lot of time looking and searching for it. Now, some of you may not have a car that long because you're like some people who just want to change shoes all the time. That may be a little bit different for you. But for the most part, on average, 4 years. And you spend a few months trying to figure that out. Now, compare and contrast that to hiring. Remembering time is money. The average person, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the average person that stays with a company, their tenure, just over 4 years. Now, the time some of us spend with them to make sure you're making the right hire, sometimes it's about 30 minutes. Because you might do your job specs and put an advertisement out there somewhere, and that's about it, and you're done. And then you're waiting to see kind of who comes in, and then you're going to evaluate from there. It's a time-consuming process. And you need to spend the same equal investment in it. Because if you think about a $35,000 car, that equates to about a $16.50 employee. So just under $17 an hour for an employee to work for you for 1 year. And you probably spend this much time. And they're potentially going to be with you much longer. Now, millennials today, some of them are moving a lot faster. Some will stay probably 2 or 3 years with the company, and they're going to move on to somewhere else. So does that excuse you from spending the time on it? No. It probably ramps it up further. Because remember, you always need to be selling your organization. And if they have a bad experience, then they're going to sell your organization the wrong way. So you need to spend time and effort with them. You need to focus in on what's very important for you to hire the very best. This is the hierarchy of needs. It was developed in the I think 60s, 50s, late 50s, by someone by the name of Abraham Maslow. Maslow was a psychologist. This model's been around for a long time. He passed away in the 70s. One of his defining achievements was this model. And it really starts with, or the whole premise of the model is that when one need is fulfilled, a person will move to the next need and the next need and the next need. The first need that you see up there at the base of the pyramid is physiological. Now, what does that translate into the world of business or in the world of hiring? Pay. You got to get the pay right. If you're not getting the pay right and you're being a little cheap and frugal about it, you're not going to get the right people right out of the gate. Your new hires don't begin at the aspire section. Some of us think they do because you want them to. You think they're going to be more about the love and belonging and esteem, but really, they want to know the pay first. They feel better about that, then they'll migrate to the other levels. But again, they have to start at the bottom. So it's important that you give yourself time to make sure you're choosing the pay correctly. You have to be vigilant in your process, just like you're buying that car. You have to be disciplined, and you have to be patient with yourself. I'm patient with every hire that I make when I'm working with another client, or even when I was working for organizations. I want to take as much time as possible. My car buying experience is pretty unique. So I spent, oodles of time researching, doing all that good stuff, and had done all the math. I knew all the numbers inside and out, and car dealers are always trying to sell you on the monthly payment rather than the total price of the car. I was all dialed in. Everything had charts. I had more information than they did. And we get down to the end of the night, and I was doing a trade-in, and my wife had already left, took my dog, and it was just me and the car dealers, and it was Saturday night. It was the end of the month. Nobody was really at the dealership. The fleet manager already left. It was me and two people, the finance guy and the guy who had been working with all day. One of the numbers came across, and it was off, about $30 a month. And I went, it's a little off. He's like, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that, we needed to include X, Y, Z. I'm like, well, you need to make up for that in the overall price of the car. And the guy says, I can't do that. Okay, well, it's been nice. Sorry. Go ahead and get my car, and I'll pick up, maybe next week, but I'll just go home now. And it's like, again, it's closing time, so it's empty in there. So he starts panicking and fretting over the whole process, and he realizes, maybe I need to reconsider. So they made the change. That patience that you're able to show even at that moment, because I really did want that car, but I was willing to walk away, is the same thing when you're hiring people. You have to be willing to walk away from those people. Hiring and going through that process and even the employee relationship is a lot like dating and courting. So you're going through a process of getting to know people and figure them out. And it's a hard process to go through. So you got to give yourself time and see as many different aspects and angles of this candidate rather than just one meeting and them walking in one day and spending time with them for a few minutes. You need to see many different angles. And for me, it kind of reminds me of kind of the honeymoon phase that you go through, which usually is like you're attracted to some other reason. And when you're attracted to some other reason, you forgo everything else. And in hiring, it's like you're interested, like, oh, this person's great, they look nice, they fit the part, I think it's going to be awesome, and you forgo a lot of other factors that you haven't given yourself the chance to even see, or you're able to put them aside because you are so fascinated by who they are and what they're about. And in dating, in the courtship, in the honeymoon phase, what you go through is you begin to think about, so just take a step back and think about it for those who have gone through that process before. You're madly in love or appreciating this person so much, everything's great about them. Everything's exciting. When they even their funny little habits, when you tell a funny joke and they laugh at your joke and then they go, they give you a little snort, oh, that's adorable, that's awesome, I love you. And then they start eating and they grind their little, they grind their fork on their teeth. And you're like, a little annoying, but they're so cute. It's okay. then they start chewing ice. And for some people hate when they chew ice, and they're like, you're like, oh my gosh, please, now you're getting too much for me. And then one day you're sitting down and you're watching, a show or a movie, and you hear that person next to you, and they're like, and you hear that deep sigh, and you look over at that person, and you go, could you just stop breathing? Because it's so annoying. And that's when the honeymoon has ended. It's not good in dating, and it's really not good in hiring. So when you're going through this process, you've got to give yourself enough room to see this individual. Because otherwise, you're going to step in and you're getting married a little too quickly. And then you're going to regret the decisions you made. So I developed 5 questions that for me, I think are pretty critical. These aren't the only key questions that I always ask, but they're just some of the thoughtful questions that I want to share with you all today because it tells me a little bit about the individual. I spend time with them. I work it over and over and over. I ask this question different ways and different times. I encourage my hiring managers to ask the same questions different ways, different times as well. It's important because it doesn't necessarily remove the feeling I had of like, oh, I'm in love with them. I think they're great. And in fact, there's a book written by Malcolm Gladwell called Blink. And he talks about how we fall in love with looks in particular and how we buy into a message just based on looks alone. Pretty fascinating book. But these questions help veer you away from just focusing on that and then trying to understand, can this person really take my aspiration that I've worked hard on to develop and take it to the next level? Breathe what I'm trying to do each and every day as a leader in my organization. And whether you are a manager or you are an owner, it's important to get your team to be able to aspire and live and breathe that message you're trying to create. The answers to these questions ultimately lead to your culture, because you're going to find a good fit. And no two cultures are the same. It's really hard to find a culture. It's really hard to develop a culture. And so sometimes people work really hard to say, our culture is this, and they'll write it out. And if you try to create one on your own, it's probably not going to be that great. If you just sit back and evaluate your why and the people you're hiring to achieve your why, you'll find your culture will develop organically. And typically, an organic culture that gets developed is far more successful than an organization that's been developed and created because out of a mission statement. Out of a why statement is a better start. Now, what's most important about culture when you're selling your organization is that the brochure matches the location. So whether you're on VRBO or Airbnb, you're going to go and look at that. You're going to see that beautiful place. You go, yeah, swim up bar, I'm in. And then you get there, and it's murky, green, place. You're like, what happened? And people are throwing beer cans at you. Not really what you signed up for. Likewise, when you're selling your organization, you need to make sure you're selling your organization that actually exists. So when people show up on day one, they're able to be effective because they want to be here for what you're able to offer. Around the corner for us, there's going to be a huge influence on your culture, whether you like it or not. And I see a few in the audience, but they're millennials. Anyone have millennials working for them today? Raise your hand. They're everywhere. There's a lot of them. And they really gravitate to the whys more than almost any generation for some time to come. The geographical mix that we're seeing today, this is a great quote. Take a moment to read it. Now, if you've seen this before, don't spoil it for others, but if you haven't, who do you think said it? Which generation are they talking about? You can guess. It's okay to be wrong. It's okay to be right, too, if you're right. Anyone? Generation before? The greatest generation? That's not very nice to say. I'm joking. This is actually said.
Generation previous to the current.
Yeah. This is actually said by Socrates. So these problems have been around for a long time, right? Everyone always looks down at this generation coming up behind them and go, "Oh my goodness, really? These problems they're forever," right? And it's ironic to see. And there's many examples in life that we all face. But I love this quote, but it really gives you perspective. Because your generational mix that is coming into the workplace today, one of my partners is a baby boomer, and I spent time with him trying to explain how to be more effective with millennials, and he pulls his hair out every day. He's like, I don't get it. I wasn't like this. I did this. Everything was so much better. And it's really challenging for a lot of people to understand it. The reality is our generation, our mix, looks something like, here's the generations defined. And I can tell you right now that millennials are the leaders, followed by baby boomers, and then followed by Gen Xers, as far as the number of them that are out there. So there's quite a bit. So the people you're hiring in are likely going to be millennials. As I mentioned, though, in my opinion, this group will really drive in droves towards your why statements if you're able to articulate it correctly. And you'll be able to begin to attract really high quality people in your organization and people who are behind what you're trying to accomplish. So it's interesting to see the impact we're going to have. Now, how do you go about attracting people? There's a lot of different ways. A lot of people go about doing it. I've touched on a lot of these things already. Job fairs, it's kind of an old, tired, and chewed way of doing it. Depending on your organization, it may or may not work. My favorite in this whole list is employer referrals. If you have a great why statement developed, and you're able to have a lot of people who understand your why, then what better group to go out there and get more people like them to come join your organization? What's key about employer referrals is that you need to reward them and maybe attach some pay, additional pay, to get them to refer people to you. And that creates for them a little of being on the hook, because I'm not going to refer someone who can't live up to the why. I'm not going to refer someone who's going to make me look bad towards you. Whether, again, you're an organization of 5, 25, or 500, my name is going to be attached to this person that I'm inviting along to join the team. So I want to make really good sure that the person who's coming around is going to be a person who I can trust to deliver on what you're trying to accomplish. Of course, there's technology, which is very important. LinkedIn is extremely popular, so is Facebook. There's a lot of different websites you can use to post your jobs. The employer referral program is probably the cheapest route to go, and some people lose sight of that because they're like, I got to pay my employees to refer somebody. Oh my gosh, but you know what? That is money. It's going to be well spent and return dollars to you. Again, none of this really matters if pay is not done correctly. Think of it as really your customer. You're not going to get many customers to come to your organization if your prices are way out of whack. You got to have good quality and you got to have good prices. Those same people, though, what's interesting, can be your next employee. I, for a short period of time, worked for Costco. Anybody heard of them? My family is like a Costco family. We've been members forever. We show up and like everyone comes and we run into each other at the Costco. Even though I have no family here, they're back in California, but usually when I go back to California and I go into a Costco that's near where my parents live, I'm likely going to see a family member there. Whether it be a cousin or whether it be a sibling, it's just a commonplace. It's like we go there to hang out because they have good hot dogs and pizza. And you can buy a whole bunch of toilet paper. It's an awesome place. We've all worked there at some point. Different family members of us have worked there. We shopped there. So as a customer, we became an employee. Now, for some of you, just think back for a second, whether you've been looking for a job or not. Has anyone ever seen a job advertised by Costco? Rarely, unless they're opening a brand new store. You see a big sign, now hiring, because they're a big store that they're just opening. But typically, there's no signs anywhere. There's no online advertisements, because most of their people come from employee referrals, and most of them stay for a long time. When you go through, they put the year that they started working there on their badge, and it's like a cult. I mean, people just love it, and there's a lot of pride about how long they've been working at Costco. So imagine your own organization and developing that same following, that same interest. You're going to get a lot of exposure and get people really excited about working there. And whether you're a customer or a current employee, it's motivating, it's inspiring. None of it's good if you can't retain. You have to build relationships with your employees. Whether you're a small company or a big company, if you don't know your people, you're gonna fail. You're not going to incentivize them to want to continue, even though they might have joined you for your why. They're not going to stay with your why much longer if you don't even know who they are. There's a gentleman I used to work with. He was a leader in an organization, and he prided himself on being a man of the people. So he'd walk in, and he was a type, in his mind, that he'd be like, hey, Joe, John, Jeff, Jim, Sheila, John, how are you guys doing? You know, like, that wasn't true. He thought he was, but it really wasn't true. Instead, people saw him as being a little more standoffish and really distant from the rest of us. But the people were here working for other reasons. They weren't working there because of the leader. Now, they may not have stayed very long because of him, because people quit managers. They don't quit, typically, organizations. They have a bad relationship. So unless they really dive in deep on that why, they're probably going to walk away. So this person who was a man of the people, he's given a thank you, a recognition to someone who is Employee of the Month, I believe. And so he's going through, reading all the accolades. Great job, he's done this, he's done that. He's served customers, and he's received good reviews, and going on and on and on. Some of us knew who this person was who's going to recognize. You know, I'm in HR, and we all know all the secrets, so I'm like waiting for him to say this person's name. But most of the people in the room don't. There's about 50 people in the room. So he's going through talking about all these accolades, about what a great person he is. And I've known him for years, because he's been employed about 6-7 years, I think. I've known him for years, and he's always done a good job. And he looks down at his note card. Okay, so can Jesus come forward? Everyone gets really quiet. His name is Jesus, and Jesus comes up to grab his recognition for being Employee of the Month. So this guy goes from being a person who is portraying himself as being this great man of the people. He really didn't even know this person's name. Now, he could have made a simple mistake, but knowing this individual, no, he really didn't know him. He pretended he did and felt like he was going to get away with it, but he didn't. And ultimately, it's going to be hard for that individual to stay much longer for an organization where he doesn't feel connected and valued. Revisiting Maslow's hierarchy. There's some key concepts that really tie into the workplace. And so I want to make sure I give you an opportunity to address that. The basic needs, the physiological, rest, work breaks, lunch, so on and so forth. These are the basic things that you should take care of. Pay is included in there. Safety is going to be about them feeling comfortable about what you're offering in your organization. But what's key here is the social needs. Social needs and safety needs kind of blend, at least for me. And that's the relationship at retaining those key employees to work in your organization. In the book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, the author Covey talks about this concept of PC balance. And he shares a story of the golden goose. The guy gets an egg. Who's heard the story about the golden goose? Okay, he gets the egg. He's all excited. I got this golden egg. It's worth millions. I'm going to go. And he catches it in. Next day, what? Another one. Goes, what? He's like just so excited. So then he gets kind of excited about it. And so he decides to cut the goose in half and see what's in it. It's a mess, first of all. But he's looking for more more eggs. Does he find them? No. Moral of the story, ultimately he ended up killing the goose, trying to get too much out of this one goose without providing any loving and care for it. And the same logic applies to your employees, the same logic applies to your friends. But you need to provide that care and feeding. You need to make them feel comfortable about what you're trying to accomplish and give them the rewards. Make those deposits in that relationship and it'll pay dividends for you down the road. And that leads into firing. It is very difficult to say goodbye. It's a challenge. I've done it too many times and I never enjoyed it. And I'm talking about people who've done wrong. It's still hard to fire somebody. I had to let go, one of the worst terminations, I had to let go of a 35-year employee getting near retirement from the company. And I had to let him go because of violation of policy. And just thinking about it now, it sets me back to that conversation and being in the room with that person. Because here's a guy who had to go home and share a message with his family as to why he lost his job. Now, he may have done something he shouldn't have done, but it was still difficult to have that conversation. And I've done the same thing for people who have fired or who have stolen from the company, to people who are just poor performers. And regardless, it's very hard. It's emotional. If you've been in a relationship and you've gone through a breakup and you've had to be the person who's communicated the breakup, say, sorry, I'm not interested in you anymore, that is much easier. It's emotional, but people feel like, I'm done. I'm going to move on. But if you've been on the receiving end of a breakup, then all of a sudden you get an appreciation of those emotions that are associated with someone saying, I'm not interested in you anymore. And what I invite you to do is to put yourself in those shoes and get a deeper understanding of what they might be going through during this process. You remembering Maslow's hierarchy and keeping in mind of that their mind is going to be spinning as you're having this conversation. So, years ago, the best way to break up was you just make a mixtape. You send back the stuff you have, they're peachy folders, and you're like, all good. If you're a millennial, you may not understand that, but you probably did a mixed CD, perhaps, right? But back in the day, it was a mixed tape. So it was like your favorite songs, you remember one another, and then people would play it over and over, and then they'd cry and all kinds of good stuff. Now, it was much easier. So in today's world, the best way to do it, when you're getting ready to fire somebody, is just send them a quick email and go on vacation and get out of Dodge. You'd be surprised how many people want to do that. But what I'll tell you is, here in the state of Colorado, and there's a few other states, the majority, say, hey, we're at will. I can fire anybody anytime I want to. I can break up with her if I want to break up with her or him. It doesn't matter. It's at will. And I always say, yeah, at will doesn't mean being at risk. And I usually say a few other things behind that, but I'm going to leave those out. Because don't put your organization at risk just because you think I can fire somebody. Think about this. Be thoughtful and be thorough. And so there's some key things that you're going to have to go through and think about. Very technical things. Things that I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about today, but there's legal considerations that you need to put in. Either documentation in place, and have you had the appropriate conversations. All that stuff leading to the breakup. For me, here's an acronym that I use that will be a tool for you guys to carry with you. At the end of the day, you just have some people who can't be a part of the tribe, right? They're not going to make it. They're not living up to your aspiration that you spent so much time on developing and hiring for. And when they don't, and you got to say goodbye because they're no longer part of the tribe, how do you go about doing it? So the acronym, TRIBE. Each letter stands for something significant, and it starts with those deposits you're making. It's called trust. So T is for trust because we're going to develop trust, and we're going to use that trust at the time we're going to have that very difficult conversation with them. The R is for rehearsing. Give yourself time to rehearse this conversation and relax. Be yourself. Allow the person to be themselves as well. If you rehearse it, you'll feel much more comfortable. You mentioned earlier about talking in your head. When it comes to this conversation, talk out loud. Because to say the words to somebody when you're looking them in the eye, you are no longer going to be a part of this organization. Effective today, you are terminated. It is very hard to do. Until you've said it out loud a dozen times, you're going to feel uncomfortable. So I encourage you to rehearse and relax in that conversation. Stay in the moment with the individual. You need to just make sure you're engaged and you're listening. It's going to be the most key technique to use. Be brief is the B. It's not to the extreme of be gone and be brilliant and just move on. Be gone, be brief, be brilliant. It's a little bit different. But it's being brief in the sense of get to the point that you need to make. Don't beat around the bush. If you rehearse, it's a little bit easier to get to the point. And the reason why it's so important to be brief is because after the first couple minutes, they shut down. They're not going to listen to anything else you're saying. So you need to give that reason and logic right up front and then deliver the message. And then almost step back and allow them to process. The E is for empathy. Be empathetic with the individual. Now, being empathetic, it's a short walk to from being empathetic to being sympathetic and then become empathetic. So don't sit there and start crying with them. Don't say, oh my gosh, it's so hard on you. Or, I really wanted to keep you, but John, that Daniel, he wanted to let you go. I really didn't know it. Don't do that, because now you become really pathetic and you go too far. But be mindful of your empathy as well. I had a boss one time who was so empathetic with a person when he terminated them that the person came back to work the next day. So be mindful of that. But no one remembers how you joined an organization. Usually even when they start, they don't remember how they came. But people remember how you leave or how you are asked to leave. So it's crucial that you provide that moment with them. You make it very meaningful for them. And you develop that empathy so at the end of the day, when you have that conversation, they can say, I appreciate this, I understand it, and thank you. You may not always get a hug at the end, but you're going to get someone who's going to appreciate you giving them the opportunity. That empathy and that saying that goodbye the best way possible could potentially lead to something greater, not only for them, but also for you. I fired a person once, this is back in California, and at the end he says, Leon, can I have your card? I said, sure. And typically what I'm thinking, I'm going to get a lawsuit. But he says, I have a friend who wants to work here, and I want to make sure he can follow up with you specifically. And I thought, great. That means he understood. He appreciated he couldn't work there anymore, but he thought of a friend who potentially could. So in the concept of always be selling your organization, you never know where that next lead might come from. And that person knew almost better than anyone else what it took to be effective in that organization, because he didn't make it and he thought someone else could. So I have a great lead to make a big difference in my company. So lessons I thought I learned from my parents. I shared with you guys at the start. Here are some of the lessons that for me at the time were very meaningful. 2 things were certain: death and taxes. Others sometimes want my money before I even made it. Some people who you hire don't care as much about your company as you do. And don't go into business for yourself. What I really learned from my parents: look ahead, keep your eyes up. Scan the horizon and see what's next for yourself. You never really know exactly what's available for you. But you have to be focused on your target and your destination. What I also learned was that it's important that you have to inspire others to care. And that goes back to the why. You can't train people to care as much as you. So in those 5 questions, if you're not picking up that they are going to be a good fit, then move on. One thing to note about those 5 questions: there is not one question in that set about skill. I'm not asking whether or not they can underwrite a claim or they can make a sale. I'm trying to figure out whether they can be a good fit with me and with my organization. So inspiring people to care is a much easier path to take. I learned about listening is more important than directing, as my parents dealt with a lot of employment issues during that time. Everyone is a customer. Everyone is potentially your next hire to make a difference for your customers. And of course, there are two things for certain: death and taxes. That will never, ever leave me for the rest of my life. What did leave me was the opportunity to own your own business, and I'm glad I was able to glean that from my parents, and it made a big impact in my life. So hopefully the time we've been able to spend today made an impact on you. I ran a little bit long on a few things, so I apologize, but I'm available to answer any questions that you may have. Here's some of the resources that I've used over the years. Tribal Leadership, Zappos, which is a great company, has an interesting process of actually paying people to quit. So I let this story out, but if you've been with Zappos for a period of time, I think after the first month, they'll come to you and say, "You like it? Oh, I love my job. Okay, well, I'm going to give you $2,000 to get out. Are you interested?" And you're like, "What?" They've carried that process on all the way up to the one-year anniversary dates and their employee anniversary dates. Such a vital process for them, because for them, if you change your mind, they'd rather you change your mind and walk out the door and they give you money and leave than to disrupt their culture. Zappos is an online shoe retailer, and they've done a great job. They got bought by Amazon, and now Amazon has adopted the same philosophy. Here's the other book, Start With Why. I might have said begins with why initially at one point, but it's Start With Why. Great author, great guy, really good. Just look up the YouTube. It's really a nice synopsis, but buy the book because it has a lot of good resources and tools in there as well. So I'm available for any questions you may have. I can stay late. If you're interested in a copy of the presentation, if you leave your business card with me, I'll be happy to email the presentation to you so you can have for reference. Feel free to reach out to me. If you don't have time today, I'd be happy to meet with you and talk further about your own needs and what you're trying to accomplish wherever it is you might be and wherever it is you might work. I thank you for your time today, and I wish you all the very best and aspiring to hire the very best for your organization. Thank you.